What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And another round of AFL action is officially in the books, which means we now get the chance to sit down and unpack all the action from yet another round. And round 20 is where today's video is focused. To think moving forward, we have 4 home and away games left. Blows my mind. Again, I've spoken about this fact over previous videos over the last couple of weeks. The off season, after the trade period, after the draft, just feels like it drags on so long, and then the season proper comes around, everybody's excited, and that 24-week span disappears just like that. And as exciting as it is to be at the back end, to be on the precipice of finals football, to see how this wildcard configuration is going to play out, and then head into the trade and draft period this year, which I feel this year, the trade period especially, is going to be red hot. I just shudder at the fact that we are a couple of months away from just absolute darkness in the way of not having any football readily available. Obviously, AFLW kicks up soon for those that are interested in AFLW, but for those that aren't, there's going to be a bit of a lull. We'll talk about that later. But for now, round 20, boy oh boy, the last couple of weeks has really shaped up to have some matchups that have proven to us as fans, whether we're supporting the teams in question or not, who the true contenders are and who just might be making up numbers in that kind of middle bracket of the ladder. Obviously, the teams down the bottom don't really have anything to play for at this point in time. Maybe a little bit of respect, a little bit of self-motivation and some confidence in themselves. But we kicked off round 20 with an absolute belter. Adelaide Oval saw Adelaide taking on Collingwood in a game where Adelaide, being the #1 pressure team in the competition, many would have thought would have walked over Collingwood, but Collingwood walk away with not just a win, but an emphatic win. 34 points, if you don't mind, and this sets up a potential top 6 finish for the Pies if they can keep this momentum rolling. They have won their last 6 on the trot, and they are proving everybody wrong. People saying they don't have the star power up forward, that defensively they've been lacking. You're correct when you say those sentiments, but Collingwood are coming out here and proving you don't need to have a team full of superstars to be a star team. They get things done. They have role players that dig deep, and to come out on top against a team that is not only rated the #1 pressure team in the competition, but statistically, when you break down things like scoring from defensive chains and things of that nature, Adelaide score within the top echelon of teams. They are statistically one of the best teams in the competition, and they got absolutely dismantled, especially in the second half. Turning attention to the match timeline just shows you the effort that was dug deep within to get the Pies over the line, and this was a gutsy win. This is a win that just builds self-belief that they can launch the back end of the next 4 games and their finals campaign within. At quarter time, they trailed 3-2-20 to 5-3-33, and at halftime they trailed 6-4-40 to 7-6-48. Then the turnaround happened. They led at 3-quarter time 10-8-68 to 9-6-60, and the final score saw them defeat Adelaide 16-12-108 to 11-8-74. It was absolutely incredible. As I said, this is the #1 rated pressure team in the competition when we're talking about Adelaide. All the inside 50 looks they got, they were getting the better of one-on-one decisions in their forward line. And again, I touched on it on last week's round recap, which dropped a couple of days ago. I feel when it comes to one-on-one kind of contests within the forward line, the defenders are getting the harder rub of the green. The forwards are the ones that are getting, away with a lot. In this game, there were a few instances where Tex had a handful of jumper pushing up into the jaw of Maynard. Free kick to Walker for being held, when you could easily argue the fact that Maynard could have and should have probably gotten a free kick as well. But this was a game where Adelaide struggled to create anything out of their defensive 50. And as I said, from defensive 50, their scoring chains this year have been absolutely solid. They only achieved an inside 50 3 times from 34 defensive 50 chains. That is way down on the output that we have seen from this football club. And they were unable to score from that particular zone. They only had the 3 inside 50s from defensive chains, and they didn't score at all from them. The last time they were scoreless from this zone was round 18, 2024. You got to go back a couple of years and that was, I won't say they were a rabble, but they weren't the team that we have seen over the last 24 to 48 months, definitely. The forward half pressure from Collingwood in this game, however, was absolutely elite. In the second half, they had a forward half pressure rating of 186, and they forced 16 forward half turnovers from Adelaide, scoring 32 points from those turnovers. In comparison, Adelaide only managed to score 7 points from that source in the second half themselves. So the pressure rating that we usually see from Adelaide was kind of out the window a little bit, and Collingwood was the team that turned it up. I don't know what happened in that second half, but something just clicked, and there were some individual performances from this game from Collingwood that I think truly set this up. None bigger than the young kid Ed Allen going to Jordan Dawson after having 17 disposals in the first half, kept him to 5 disposals in the second half, and clamping somebody down like Jordan Dawson, that's going to go a long way to stifling Adelaide's ball movement, and that's exactly what happened in this particular outing. I cannot remember if there were any injuries in this game, so I'm going to quickly check the match report. I don't think... Maynard has a knee injury listed down here. I'm not sure about the severity, because if it was severe, I would have remembered. Now, before we get into the team statistics, the one thing that has been a glaring talking point coming out of this particular game is the last time these two played each other, obviously last year in the final series, or just prior to the final series. I think it could have been in the final series itself. We saw the suspension of Isaac Rankin due to the homophobic slur that he made towards Isaac Quaynor. Now, coming into this game, I'm sure many Adelaide fans would have been told to be a bit respectful and mindful, but every single time Isaac Quaynor touched the ball or went anywhere near it, the entire Adelaide fraternity just were in raptures with absolutely booing him and jeering him. And I've seen many different takes on this. I've seen some people posting on social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, suggesting that this has been done because Isaac Quaynor is a black man. And this isn't anything to do with racism at all. I mean, people are likening it to Adam Goodes, and in a way, you can make assumptions as much as you want, given, you know, the fact that Isaac Quaynor is a black man and people are suggesting it's a racial kind of targeting. But to boo somebody who was a victim of a homophobic slur and just spoke up and found their voice, I don't fucking understand the thought process in the Adelaide supporters' heads thinking that that's an okay thing to do. I think it is a hugely negative spotlight you're shining on your club, and you should be absolutely disgraced if you were one of those people. I mean, you can sit there and say, oh, harden up, it's just a game, you know, words shouldn't be affecting anybody. But Quaynor took a stand against something that not only on a football field, but something within society that needs to stop. And a homophobic slur or an attack in that vein is something that doesn't need to be in the game at all. And, you know, I just think it was just so stupid, blatantly fucking stupid to hear all that booing and jeering. But we'll move on, because I don't want to make this a political type of thing. I don't want to go down that pathway, but I just think if you're one of those people, do better. Statistically, Collingwood did have the better of the game in disposal, 387 to 354. They both equally had 211 kicks, but it was the handball game of Collingwood, especially in the second half, that was able to open up some uncontested possession, 176 to 143. Despite the huge gap on the scoreboard, 34 points, Collingwood only had 2 more inside 50s for the game, 49 leading 47. The difference obviously being from 47 entries, Adelaide ran at 48% effectiveness. Collingwood, from their 49 entries, ran at 67% effectiveness, which was almost 20% higher than their seasonal average. They just came into their own in this game. Around the contest, Collingwood marginally won the hit-out count, 47-43. Adelaide marginally won the clearance battle, 41-38. Their biggest gap being at stoppage clearance, where they won 31-24 rather. Around the traps, contested possession, Collingwood had 10 more. They had only 7 more uncontested possessions, but they turned the ball over way less. Adelaide, having 70 turnovers for the game, completely outdid them. Now, Collingwood is a team that prides themselves on marking and slowing down play. They average 100 marks over the course of this season, but they only had 80 marks for this game, whereas Adelaide hit their seasonal average of 92. Adelaide played a slower type of gameplay because they had to, because Collingwood came out and started doing a run and carry game that started undoing Adelaide's process, and they tried to take the sting out of the game a little bit by slowing things down and getting things back on their terms, but unfortunately just wasn't working for them. Collingwood were just so effective around the contest. Pressure gauge, as I said, 67-68 tackles the way of Adelaide, which is well up on Collingwood's average, and inside 50, 9 tackles laid by Collingwood, generating those forward half turnovers, which led obviously to hitting some scores and sources from those scores. Incredible work. I was proven wrong. I thought Adelaide had this in the bag quite comfortably, and Collingwood have come out, and to win like they did here just doesn't give them some self-belief, but also just shows people at home, whether you support Collingwood or not, that they can't be written off. All the experts have been saying Collingwood can't win a premiership. They can't even win a prelim final. They're not going to make a prelim final. On any given day, I feel Collingwood's best is enough to rock the boat and cause damage to any team they face, and they proved it in this outing. As far as the votes went, I did give 1 vote to Ed Allen. I just thought, even though he might have only had, 17 disposals himself, to clamp Jordan Dawson down to only 5 disposals in the second half and take any effectiveness or input out of the game from him was huge and turned this game around emphatically. 17 disposals, 5 contested, 3 tackles, 2 clearances, 487 metres gained, 2 goals, 7 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Darcy Cameron has had an up and down year, but really came into his own and proved that his best when he is up and running ranks him amongst the best ruckmen in the competition. 23 disposals, 18 contested, 3 marks, 9 tackles, 37 hitouts, 6 clearances, 191 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. But 3 votes landed to whisper once more, Nick Daicos. And this is going to be a name that we speak about later in the video. We'll touch on it later when the time comes. 39 disposals, 18 contested, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 7 clearances, 610 metres gained, 1 goal, 10 score involvements. We're going to be talking about another player at the end of the video who had bigger numbers than Daicos in way of disposal, but had way less effectiveness with disposal in hand, at least in my opinion, and social media has been blowing up about said player. If you're wondering who we're talking about, I am talking about Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira. I just think it is a fruitless conversation when many people are sitting there calling Nick Daicos a seagull, when Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira's stat line shows that he does the same, if not more than what Daicos has been doing, and he gets spoken about in a higher light, in a different vein. Just think Nick Daicos is a different beast this year. If, after watching this particular game, if Nick Daicos does not win the Brownlow this year, he has been robbed. He has been this season's best so far, in my personal opinion. I don't think it's going to be as big of a gap as the AFL Brownlow predictor is showing. They're showing so far that he's on track to have a 50-plus vote season, and I don't think he's had that good of a year. He's been great, and there's a handful of games where he's not going to poll, but he is just as generational as they come, and his effectiveness with ball in hand, his score involvements, just how easy he makes things look. He does remind me of Pendlebury so much, but Collingwood, boy oh boy, write them off at your behest. Truly. Adelaide fumbling this game, though, does mean they might be out of touch for a top 4 finish, because now revealing how they can be shut down, they can be beaten at home, especially against teams that they're predicted to beat quite comfortably. the run home doesn't look as simple as the fixture might suggest. We had 2 games again on Friday night, which I think is fucking ridiculous. We'll talk about the fixturing later in the video because there's a point I would like to make that might be a little bit mute, but we're going to do it when the time comes. But this time clashing, especially with these 2 games, should have been fixtured a hell of a lot better, given the fact that Melbourne versus Geelong ended up shaping up to be one of the better games of the round, with 2 teams vying for a top 4 finish. And then the Western Derby between Fremantle and West Coast, even though that ended up being a whitewash, is a game that should be highlighted because of the rivalry, because of the stance of that, you know, those two teams coming together. But it did kick off at the MCG with Melbourne hosting Geelong. We have seen Geelong up and down. These injuries that they have sustained, I feel, might hamper them come finals time. And I honestly thought going into this game, with no Jeremy Cameron, with Sean Manor, I didn't think Sean Manor was going to play given the hamstring tightness he had the week prior, but he got up and he played. The injury to Max Holmes. In this game, we saw Patrick Dangerfield go down with injury. He did play the game out, but I think he foolishly did so. And, you know, they had Tanner Bruhn come back in. I think it's just some of these injuries they've sustained to key movers and players gave myself some self-doubt. And Melbourne came into this game with every possibility and thought process of walking away with a win. And that for periods of this game, I thought that's exactly what was going to happen. But inaccuracy crept in, and unfortunately, 20 points to the way of Geelong in a game where I feel Melbourne let it slip out of their hands off of their own boot. The match timeline breaks it down. Quarter time, Melbourne had a comfortable 10-point lead, 4-4-28, leading 3 straight 18. At halftime, Geelong's 10-4-64 led Melbourne's 6-8-44. Three-quarter time, Geelong led 12-9-81 to 9-9-63. And the final scoreline saw Geelong 18-9-117 defeat Melbourne 14-13-97. It was not without effort from both teams. And even though the scoreline suggests, you know, basically 3.5 goals, this was a game where both teams had players throw everything at it until the final siren. And as a neutral supporter, that's all you want to see. These are 2 teams that are pushing for a finals finish this year. They want to finish in that top 4. They put everything on the line. This is hard-fought football, and I absolutely love seeing that. It was not without controversy, because there were plenty decisions in this game that did not go against Geelong that have people, including myself, questioning the integrity of umpire decision making. Now, I've said numerous times, and I even posted about it on social media again this week, the ability for umpires to adjudicate holding the ball or other rules within the game determinant on what jumper you are wearing is ridiculous. To have a game where 2 teams have something adjudicated completely differently just blows my mind. And there were instances where Melbourne got caught holding the ball and it wasn't called, don't get me wrong, but the instances from Geelong were so glaringly there and obvious, and in situations where paying the free kick would have turned the tide. None bigger than the example I'm going to give of Tom Stewart. Gets the ball inside defensive 50, ends up shirking a tackle, but gets tackled just past the halfway point between the wing and half back. He's taken the ball a good 30-40 metres, quite comfortably. Gets caught holding the ball. Everybody on the ground, including Geelong players, stop, because they're expecting the whistle to go because they've all seen it go down. And then you hear the umpire, plain as day, exclaim that he got his handball away, it's play on. Now, it ended up a resulting free kick to Melbourne a further 50-odd metres down the line because Bailey Smith had last touch and it went out of bounds, and it was a lasso free kick. But having a free kick paid on your half-forward line when everyone had stopped and they could have taken that momentum for an inside 50 to have a shot on goal at that point in time would have shifted everything Melbourne's way, I feel. And it just fucking kills me that great games of football can be tarnished by decisions and non-decisions like the one that we saw in this particular game. As I did mention, Patrick Dangerfield did cop an injury. He was knocked pillar to post. He didn't look good at all. On the match listing, he is listed as a groin injury, so let's stay up to date with how that plays out. For Melbourne, Latrell Pickett ended up in concussion. Van Ruin ended up with a nose injury and Chandler with a hand injury. I think Van Ruin and Chandler will both be fine, but obviously the concussion to Pickett does mean he will miss his round 21 hit out. There was one late change, in this game. Sam De Koning late out, illness replaced by Ollie Henry, who ended up kicking 3 or 4 goals. So he was great for Geelong to come in and to play the role he did at that capacity. But again, that speaks to a talking point for Geelong, and I feel, even though it's within the rules of the game, I feel Chris Scott is rorting that rule quite severely. Coming into a game of football, you obviously see the teams that come out, they announce the teams that are playing, and then effectively an opposition coach can then choose to pick a team, and then the team that's picked work out who's going to be manned against who, and you work your systems around the players that you see your opponent has selected. But Geelong have this innate ability that very, very late, only moments before they're able to do so, and they can't do so anymore, there is always an announcement. Somebody is a late out. And Sam De Koning, okay, might not be, this A-grade player, but he plays a role. He plays that ruck role, that defensive role. He is definitely somebody that you can do a negating role against to take that effectiveness out of the game. And I just feel there should be prominent timeline on whether or not late outs, like that happen. Like, it's just listed as illness. What illness are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? It's just, to me, it's just a little bit, you're drawing straws, and Chris Scott is like manipulating the straw that you pull. That's all I think anyway. Maybe I'm being a little bit facetious and stupid. Team statistics for this game, rather even in disposal. 375 to Geelong, the way of 363. They won the kicking game, 227 to 204, but lost the handball game by 11, 159 to 148. Where the gap was, those extra disposals, and there weren't many of them, equated to 11 more inside 50s for Geelong, 62 to 51. Geelong only ran at 51% inside 50 from their 62. And despite the losses, the misses on goal, and me sitting here saying that the effectiveness could have been a hell of a lot better, 60% of the inside 50 efficiency for Melbourne from their return is incredible. Now, I was just talking about umpiring decisions here in a game where Melbourne's had 8 more disposals for the game, but I suppose it's hard because you look at the free kick count and you think it's that skewed, and I'm trying to make an argument that Geelong, should have had a lot more free kicks paid against them, which would have further skewed the free kick count, and then people would have argued that Melbourne were getting kissed on the dick. So it's really rough from that kind of aspect. Looking at the stoppage game, breaking even in clearance, 35 apiece, despite Melbourne's dominance in the ruck, 49 hitouts to 22. Around the traps, contested possession was won by Melbourne, uncontested was won by Geelong. The marginable difference here was, again, Geelong play this defensive structured game where they love to maintain possession out of the back line and then work their way out through either handball receives with the likes of Bailey Smith, who's been doing a lot over the last few weeks, especially with Max Holmes out. But 113 marks to 78 really set the scene here. Both teams having great returns inside 50. Melbourne taking 17 inside 50 marks and Geelong 16. But it's just their defensive ability to maintain possession, slow the clock down, and make sure that their defensive 50 exits are hit with precision is what sets Geelong up to win more often than not. Defensively, both teams laying a good amount of tackles, 49 to 46, both down on their seasonal averages, but around the contest, it was hot, it was heavy, teammates were getting absolutely pummeled into the ground. I just love watching a hard-fought game of football, especially when you see, tackle numbers like 9, 8, 6, 5, 5. These players really putting everything out on the line. I found it a little bit tough to drop votes this week, and a little bit rough in the way of some of the players that I've kind of ignored here, because I've gone for who I felt impacted the game in their positions the most, which means Max Gawn, Tom Sparrow, Jack Steele, Tanner Bruhn, Bailey Smith aren't getting votes in this particular game when they're the top 5 ranked players on the field. I just feel the 3 I landed on, and we'll talk about it in a moment's time, were more effective in their given roles and set the game up. I thought defensively for Geelong, Tom Stewart was huge, and I gave him 1 vote. 25 disposals, 11 contested, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 434 metres gained, and 5 score involvements from the back half. The 2 vote I gave to Harrison Petty, who I have rubbished many times before, but this man's influence on the game was huge for Melbourne. 14 disposals, let's keep this in mind. 14 disposals, 6 contested, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 266 metres gained, 4 goals, 2 goal assists, 13 score involvements. All but 1 touch this guy had resulted in Melbourne hitting the scoreboard. That is huge in my books. And best on ground, absolutely chopped up Melbourne's defensive half. Shannon Neal really stepping up to the plate with the absence of Jeremy Cameron. 13 disposals, 6 contested, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 205 metres gained, 5 goals, 2 goal assists, 9 score involvements. What did we learn? Both teams' best is top 4 calibre football. It's just marginally you give the edge, obviously, to Geelong, given the fact that they have more experience, especially when it comes to this end of the season, when it comes to finals. These players are going to stand tall. But to have Melbourne coming out with such a younger list comparatively to what we've seen over recent years, and to see these kids step up, like Harrison Petty, I thought was Melbourne's best given his output. But to see Tom Sparrow, to see Jake Bowie, to see Colton Tholstrup, to see Langford, to see Bailey Laurie, to see Joel Fitzgerald as a mid-aged, recruit. Cade Chandler got injured but still had input on the game. To see all these names thrown about holds Melbourne in such great stead. And obviously a lot of people thought with the loss of Petrarca, with the loss of May, with the loss of Oliver, Melbourne were going to be the big dippers this year. But given the fact that they're going to finish potentially top 6 this year, huge turnaround. And you can't put either of these teams out to pasture. This is the first loss for the year that Melbourne has had at the MCG. If they get a run during the final series where they only stay at the MCG, they can do the most damage, I feel, out of any team that isn't currently well within that premiership conversation. And Geelong, we just know they find ways to get things done. So both of these teams featuring highly during September, during that finals race, going to be very interesting to see where they both land. The second game on Friday night already alluded to the Western Derby, Fremantle taking on West Coast. And while Fremantle have been the benchmark this year, West Coast have been showing some promising signs even in defeat. And this was a game that I said it wouldn't be a blowout. I thought West Coast would be a little bit more competitive. However, Fremantle did Fremantle things, just reconfirming to the competition that they seriously are the best team in it this year, running away with a 70-point win. And it was a very tight game up until halftime. And this has been the tale of the tape for Fremantle for the last 3 weeks. We saw 3 weeks ago against Sydney, they only kicked 11 behinds in that second quarter, first half. And then they went on to kick 100 points in the second. Last week, or the week prior, they play Port Adelaide, and Port Adelaide were up to their necks in it up until halftime, and then Fremantle put their foot on the gas. Same thing happened in this game. Quarter time, West Coast led 3-1-19 to 2-6-18. At halftime, Fremantle led 5-10-40 to 5-2-32. And then that's where the runaway started to happen. Fremantle 10-12-72 led 6-4-40, and Fremantle 16-16-112 defeated West Coast 6-6-42. The only thing that I want to question about the last 3 weeks with Fremantle is we know their run and carry game is the best in the business. We know that statistically they are running as one of the best in the comp, and being 3 to 4 games clear on top solidifies that fact. But come finals time, if they play this style of football where it's only a second half runoff that sees them win, are teams going to allow that luxury to happen? If they come up against a Geelong or a Brisbane, for example, are they going to have a game where if they perform poorly in the first half or break even in the first half, they're going to run away with it? I don't think so. And I think that could be a very unnatural, it could be their undoing, is what I'm trying to say. I'm getting my words mixed up here, but that could definitely be a situation where if they leave the door open at halftime, some teams aren't going to, just back off from the door. They're going to kick that bastard down, and you're not going to see runoffs like this happen from Fremantle. But it still was a game where, just dominantly throughout the course, even in the first half, Fremantle were solid from start to finish. Now, at that 8-point halfway margin, you would have thought that, West Coast aren't going to this wasn't going to be an outcome. Just the way West Coast played in that first half, it's hard to imagine that they get blown out by over 12 goals in the end. It's just absolutely incredible to think that fact. And you don't know how to attribute that, really. Do you attribute that to inexperience from West Coast kids, or do you attribute that to Fremantle being as good as they genuinely have been this year? With 17 more contested possessions only, Fremantle didn't have too big of a gap in that retrospect, but they managed to generate more from that gap. They had 9 more inside 50s for the game. Generated from forward 50 chains, they scored 31 points after scoring just 1 point from forward 50 chains in the first half. They just got things going in the second half. It seems like it's almost like Fremantle come out and test the waters in the first half, and then the second half they get their shit into gear and all their systems fall into place, especially over the last month. Despite the Eagles having controlled spurts throughout the game where they had the better of the ball, they had all the momentum on their side, and they led the uncontested marks around the ground by 33. So they were getting their hands on it, and they were controlling the ball. They were unable to gain territory from that disposal, from holding the ball up. All that momentum that they got in was undone rather quickly. And, the Dockers collectively gained 500 more meters from marks in this game, which just goes to show the marks that they were taking, they were quick to move the ball on. They weren't going sideways, they weren't maintaining backwards, they were always looking for a forward press. What gets me the most is West Coast have been a very good stoppage team this year, and they got blown out of the water in that regard. They had 7 fewer clearances, and they were outscored from clearance 50-8. Just absolutely ripped apart in a team that has been very consistent in that retrograde this year. It's just interesting to see so much hard work and effort go into certain games, and then it was just all completely outdone in this game. You just want to hope as a West Coast supporter that over the next 4 weeks a little bit more continuity can be found in their game. Now, there was an injury in this game. The only injury for the game was to Franku from West Coast, a mid-season draftee who originally when he went down, I thought he was cramping up because he went down and he was holding his legs straight, and then everyone was saying, oh, it could be a knee. But what had happened was he got tackled and he rolled his knee over the studs of his own boot and he sliced his leg open. And just some of the looks that the players were giving in the heat of the moment, a lot of blood, they had to turn away from it. It was a gruesome injury. It was very ugly. So can only hope, stitch him back up together, and I hope he's okay. But boy, you very rarely see shit like that go down on a football field. It was very left wing. Team statistics. Let's break it down. Eagles only had 5 more disposals collectively for the game, 375 to 370. They had 11 more kicks. They had 6 less handballs. So in a game where Fremantle, obviously for the course of the year, has run a strong handball game, West Coast matched them. But for 2 teams that had very similar circumstance with ball in hand and had plenty of numbers, Fremantle generated 52 inside 50s against 35. And from those 52 inside 50s, they ran at 65%. For West Coast, their 35 entries saw them run at 37%, which is almost 10% down on their seasonal average. Now, it was a game, do not get me wrong, that was heavily adjudicated. There were 40 free kicks paid in this game. Of the 40, 27 of them went to Fremantle. Do with that as you will. I didn't see any any glaring omissions or things that happened that would indicate that Fremantle were just getting better adjudicated on the day. I just think, obviously, first to the football, they were getting a lot of holding the ball opportunities paid. There were some silly free kicks given away by West Coast as well. But again, a skewed game that blows out by 70 points. You see a team get 15 more free kicks in a game or 14 more free kicks in a game of football, and people start to question legitimacy. And that's where the gap in this game is. Some people argue it's not about the free kicks paid, it's the free kicks that aren't. I just don't like seeing tallies like this, because it just, you know, it just creates negative conversation. That's it. Around the stoppage, again, 50 hitouts to 27, the way of Fremantle. 37 hitouts to 30, the way of Fremantle. At stoppage, West Coast actually matched them 22 to 21 respectively, but centre clearance, Fremantle won 15 to 9. And again, from those clearances, they scored 50 points. It set them up for a huge win here. Contested possession, 127 the way of Fremantle to 105, and they lost the uncontested possession again. West Coast leading that 263 to 239. West Coast had plenty of the ball again, 116 marks when they're averaging 86 for the season, and the Dockers only having 87. But again, it's more quality control. It's more getting return and more bang for your buck. Fremantle don't fuck around with it. If they hold it up, it's for a reason. They're not going sideways. They're not going backwards. They can hold it, but then they're moving forward. And that's what they're always trying to do as a club, especially with ball in hand. Around the contest, 11 more marks laid by Fremantle as well. They just mounted the pressure where it needed to be applied. And again, to walk away with a 70-point win at this point in the season, not only just solidify that top spot, but get another healthy percentage boost is incredibly handy. Now, I have given 3 votes to 3 Fremantle players here, but I want to highlight some efforts. I think Tim Kelly's year this year has been understated. I think he has been really good. Tom McCarthy out of the back line and Brady Huff out of the back line was good as well. Harley Reid, 12 clearances and 30 disposals. I tried arguing a case for 1 vote for him in this game, and I just feel he's just lost in the mix. Obviously, you lose by 70 points, but you have an outstanding game like that. It's hard to justify from an objective standpoint, and that's where, moving forward, I'm going to do a coach's vote system next year and onwards, 5-4-3-2-1 instead of 3-2-1. That way he would have been highlighted. And it was even hard to find a spot to get him into this week's Team of the Week, which is rough, but it's just good seeing him play good football. When he goes about it and just focuses on footy and not bullshit, he looks so incredibly well. And I'm in the boat of, you know, Richmond have been tied to Zach Butters as a potential. I'd rather be throwing around some money to try to get Harley Reid down to Victoria, and I'd love to get Harley Reid on board. That's just my take. But outside of that, I think the highest ranked player on the field here, 8 marks. He had 36 disposals, and I'm going to assume he must have ran at a high disposal efficiency given his output. From his 36 disposals, he ran at 86% efficiency, and that was Marcus Herbert, mid-season draftee. Now, I'm very, very cut up about the fact that West Coast took him, because I was a firm believer that Richmond should have put Josh Smiley on the long-term injury list and picked up a secondary selection in the mid-season draft, especially now the fact that they've come out and said he's not going to play a game for the rest of the year. Like, it's stupid to me that they wouldn't take opportunity to bring in another player. Herbert would have been available for selection for Richmond had we have taken a secondary pick. And we fumbled, because I think he would fit into our midfield group so incredibly well. And he's the type of player that you can roll off of halfback and he'd be just as effective. You can play off of a wing. You can play off of half forward. They have a great tendency, West Coast, to find some star players during this mid-season pickup. We've seen the likes of McCarthy, Ryan Marich, and now we've got Herbert. They're doing themselves well. The votes, though, I landed on 3 for Fremantle, and controversially, even though Murphy Reid got best on ground for the game and he received the medal, he's not getting 3 votes from me in this game, and I will justify why. I did give 1 vote to Jai Amos, 15 disposals, 8 contested, 8 marks, 186 metres gained, 5 goals, 1 goal assist, 11 score involvements. Some would argue the goals he was kicking were off the back of his teammates' hard work and he was getting the easy ball over the back, but hey, you kick 5, you're in conversation. I gave Murphy Reid 2 votes, 26 disposals, 6 contested, 4 marks, 2 clearances, 463 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 8 score involvements. Because I thought Caleb Sarong played a better game. Just my personal opinion. 25 disposals, 8 contested, 6 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 409 metres gained, and 11 score involvements. Again, this could be the case of speaking about Murphy Reid falling into a category of like a Nick Dacos in the way that the name is preceding on-field ability. And Murphy Reid is All-Australian this year, and he played a great game. But I don't think he played better than Caleb Sarong. And I feel that because eyes are always on Murphy Reid and commentators are always talking about Murphy Reid, that actively when it comes to voting for things like this, if Murphy Reid plays well, despite not playing as well as others, he's going to generate all those votes. And he got a possible 8 of 9 votes for this award. So, deserved, don't get me wrong, but I think there was one better. What did we learn? Fremantle. Very much I feel one hand on the Premiership Cup already, and if they don't make it to the grand final, they have absolutely fumbled an all-time fumble. It'll be something that historically we talk about for years to come if they don't make it to the grand final after the dominance they have had this year. For West Coast, there's shining light with all this young talent, but the continuity between rocking up week to week is where they fail. They show so much promise and hard-fought effort one week, and even up until half-time in this game, they were well in it. And then just, I don't know, they just dropped their bundle in the second half, and I don't understand where that comes from. Maybe inexperience, maybe these kids are still learning, but it still holds them in high regard. I'm still a firm believer, and I'm still going on record as saying, I feel by the time Tasmania comes into the competition within the next 2 years, West Coast will be competing for wildcard spots in the finals. Heard it here first, and if anybody needs to run it back to hear it again, I'm happy to say it again. I think they have a list that is that good. The first on Saturday was at Marvel Stadium with Carlton taking on the Gold Coast, and boy oh boy has there been a talking point come out of this game that is driving media outlets to post some real outlandish shit, but I think it's something we should talk about. Namely, Carlton run away with a 13-point win. This was a win Carlton needed to have in order to keep their wildcard chances alive, and this just adds to the tally of the Gold Coast's downfall, which I think now we can start attributing to the players not being in touch with the coach. There's disconnect between player and player as well. There is some shit going on at the Gold Coast behind the scenes that we're not being privy to, which has aided this downfall. Now, statistically, they have performed worse with Matt Rowell back in the team. And some would say, well, that's because Matt Rowell's back in. But I think it's because they have picked up a player that might have brought a little bit of ego with him that is causing some discourse, and I am talking about Christian Petrarca, which we will get to momentarily. This was a game that the Gold Coast early took a huge lead, and then a little bit of a tussle between quarters saw the lead reined back and forth, but Carlton, I feel, just were the better team during the course of the game. At quarter time, Gold Coast trailed 3-2-20 to 3-4-22. At halftime, they trailed 7-4-46 to 7-7-49. At three-quarter time, they trailed 10-4-64 to 11-10-76, with Carlton winning the game ultimately 16-14, 110 to 15-7, 97. Wasn't without trying. Gold Coast had opportunities, but Carlton just maintaining momentum where they saw fit. And it was forward 50 stoppages that saw Carlton absolutely dominate. From their forward 50 stoppages here, there was 12-0 the way of Carlton that they won. And the fact that they won 12-0 in that stoppage clearance is especially forward half of the ball, not just generally, just forward half. Whenever the ball was at stoppage and a ball up was there, Gold Coast did not win a forward 50 stoppage at all. But from those 12, they kicked 6 goals too, which is damning. When you got the ball inside your forward 50 and you win stoppage that easily and you're putting scores on the board, that was Gold Coast undoing from the get-go. It's their best differential this season from this source. And Patrick Cripps recorded a game-high 5 clearances from that zone, returning 5 score involvements. He's really turned his season around. He started off the year with a lot of people questioning legitimacy to the Brownlows he's won, but he's started putting in some efforts that are starting to solidify that he actually is one of the better midfielders in the competition, and maybe I'm not putting enough respect on his name. Not 100% certain on injuries for this game, so I'm going to quickly check the match report live just to make sure. Nick Newman did a hamstring. Damning for Carlton, because seeing him back in that lineup has been solidifying for their back half. We'll talk about team statistics, and then we'll talk about Christian Petrarca momentarily. Carlton, as close of a game it was, Carlton dominated disposal by over 100. 438 to 321. They had 256 kicks to 172. 182 handballs to 149. And yet, despite having 117 more disposals, they only had 5 more inside 50s for the game. 57 to 52. The difference obviously being inside 50. From those 57 inside 50s, Carlton ran at 68% efficiency, with Gold Coast only running at 44% for their 52. Around the stoppage, Gold Coast had the better of the ruck battle, 37 to 22, but it was Carlton's clearance work, 39 to 28, which was the most damning, especially again, stoppage clearance, 21 to 13, the way of the Blues. Uncontested possession, they had 90 more. And they had almost 30 more contested. Just around the contest, they were cleaner. They found gaps outside with, being able to run handball, with getting their kicking game going, and they were just finding spots where they opened up Gold Coast from defensive half to forward half. 133 marks for the game they took against 77. They let up almost 60 more marks for the game, the Gold Coast, which just allowed Carlton to play that controlled game, and especially given with all that uncontested ball that they had, 90 more, they were able to just take marks and chip it around and really open them up. They had 100 plus more disposals and laid more tackles, 52 to 34. This is the same instance that we saw with Richmond against Hawthorn 2 weeks ago. Hawthorn had 100 plus disposals and laid more tackles. Carlton have done the same thing here. Gold Coast's fall is something that needs to be studied. They started the year so strong, and then things have dropped off, and it's been highlighted because of the moment in time, and I've looked at this in 2 different ways. There was a play in forward half of the ball where there seems to be a set play with the Gold Coast where Christian Petrarca and either one of Matt Rowell or Noah Anderson run a play which opens up space for Petrarca to get the ball and have a snap-on goal inside 50 stoppage. But Leo Lombard, at this particular stoppage, cuts Petrarca off and takes the ball from him when Petrarca was going to get the ball. And Lombard ends up getting pinned for holding the ball. You can see Christian Petrarca in the moment take his mouthguard out, get stuck into Lombard, so much so that plain as day on camera, Lombard turns around to Christian Petrarca and tells him to fuck off. Now, there's been headlines made that there is a new recruit to the Gold Coast this year that doesn't believe that it is the environment he was made to believe it's going to be, and there's considering movement. Now, the only 2 of note that I can think of is Christian Petrarca and Jamara Ugle-Hagan. Now, Ugle-Hagan going to the Gold Coast, I made comments on social media leading up to the season saying they're taking a renowned party boy, somebody who likes the drink, likes a bit of drugs as well, and obviously recently seen leaving a bathroom with Mac Andrew, which you can only assume 2 grown men leaving a bathroom together, 1 or 2 things that happen. They're doing something with their noses or they're doing something with their mouths. And I don't think Mac Andrew and Jamara Ugle-Hagan are that inclined with the mouth. So let's leave assumptions to the side. But a known party boy, drugs, alcohol, everything else. And taking him to the Gold Coast is your solution? You're taking him to Party Central? It was doomed from the beginning, and I don't think he'll ever play a game of football again. I don't think any club would be stupid enough to try to pick him up. But now there's discourse around Christian Petrarca potentially bringing an ego with him and now leaving Melbourne. Maybe he was an issue there. Maybe Melbourne's now performing better because Christian Petrarca maybe was a bit selfish of a player. Not at all attacking his character, but these are the conversations that are now happening. Would love to discuss it down in the comments below if you believe that to be true or not. The votes for this game, as close as it was, I'm landing with 3 Carlton players. The first of which I'm giving a vote to Taylor Byrne. I think as a small forward, he's been a revelation for Carlton this year. 17 disposals, 7 contested, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 284 metres gained, 3 goals, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements. Again, very much in the vein of Harrison Petty. He has 17 touches and 12 of those result in score. I think in a close contest, that needs to be spoken about. 2 votes goes to Jarga Smith. A lot of people think he's got the rising star wrapped up. I still think Willem Dersma makes a case. I still think even Harry Dean in defence for Carlton makes a case as well. 31 disposals, 10 contested, 7 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 153 metres gained, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, and I gave best on to Paddy Cripps. His work around the contest was huge. 30 disposals, 21 contested, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 15 clearances, 419 metres gained, 1 goal, 10 score involvements. What did we learn? Gold Coast is starting to prove. Very similar vein to what St Kilda have proven this year as well. Bringing in star players does not instantly create a star team. There could be disconnect. There can be mix matching in chemistry. And we have seen potentially one of the better lists in the competition, especially bulked up as much as it has with the Gold Coast, fall from grace so hard that I'm trying to contain my laughter. For the Blues, they keep wildcard chances alive, and when they're playing great contested ball and they can generate score from the outlets they did, they can chop up some teams 100% and could be a dark horse within wildcard configuration, which pains me to say it, but they do look good from time to time, and they looked great in this particular outing. The next game, unfortunately, one of those games that we can glance over rather quickly, but I do have a point to make from this outcome. Hawthorn taking on Essendon. Hawthorn by the way of 93 points. Now, this has me wanting to float a fixturing idea around. 2 weeks in a row, they've had Essendon and Richmond, the bottom 2 teams, fed to them. They've won by over 70 points in both outings, and they've boosted their percentage immensely off of the back of those games. It's a bit rough to think that some teams get the advantage of playing the bottom teams in the back half of the year and getting these wins, getting this percentage booster, while other teams have to fight through the mid-card just to make it to finals in the first place. And what I'm floating as an idea here is the first 18 rounds of football, 19 given when Tasmania come in, you have every single team play each other once, because there are some teams this year that are yet to play one team once, but have already played some teams twice, which I think is ridiculous fixturing. The first 18 rounds, have every team take each other on once. That way, everybody's played each other once, right? You then have 5 to 6 games left in the year. Top 8 face each other, bottom 10 face each other. You then have a determined top 6 because they're all fighting amongst each other for the right. Then your bottom 10 fight for the back end of your finals fixturing, and then to fight to stay out of the bottom half of that. You know, they don't want first. Yeah, some teams might want first pick and might tank, and that could be something that comes in. But I think it'd be better structured that way, to have the top teams facing each other and the bottom teams facing each other, instead of seeing teams get beat up like this late in the piece and advantaging, you know, some teams over others. Just my take. Feel free to disagree. But yeah, this was Hawks from second quarter onwards, because in the first quarter, Essendon were actually rather competitive. 3-5-23 to 2-3-15, but after that, boy, 9-8-62 to 2-5-17, 14-14-98 to 3-6-24. Final score was 19-18, 132 to 5-9-39. After quarter time, in a hard-fought quarter, Essendon only managed to kick 3 goals 6 for the entire game. Hawthorn went on to kick 16 goals 13. It could have been a hell of a lot more ugly. This could have been a game where they pushed 160, 170 points in score and 110, 120 point loss. This was a dominant display, which again, take another 4 points on a comprehensive beatdown. And that's why I think some fixturing could aid seeing shit like this happen in the long run, but can't take away from the Hawks. They've just been so dominant, and again, when they get their ball going, they look incredibly well. Lewis for Hawthorn ended up in concussion, so we'll miss next week, which is unfortunate because he's been in a rich vein of form. Ridley with a foot injury, Sullivan Roby with a knee injury, and Day Wicks is listed as a to be determined injury, so keep up to date with that. Essendon hit rather harsh with injury this year, so not good to see some of those names listed. As you could imagine, statistically, this game is all very lopsided. 462 disposals to 302 the way of Hawthorn. 68 inside 50s to 36. Stoppage, little bit of light to cling on to for Essendon here. They won the hitouts 37 to 29, and they only lost the clearance by 12, which in a almost 100-point loss, that's actually something to commend themselves on. But then around the contest, I mean, uncontested possession, 332 to 181. Hawthorn were just doing whatever they wanted with the ball. 148 marks to 73. They've doubled the marks for the game, and even with all that, you know, they only laid 12 less tackles, Hawthorn, and they had 100 plus more disposals. So it was just, again, as I said, as comprehensive a beatdown as you'll see. Does it disadvantage some other teams in that finals fixturing because of the dominance of some clubs being able to play the bottom and some don't? I don't know. Feel free to argue that again. But for this game, so many Hawthorn players to pick from. I mean, the highest rated in 2 weeks ago for Essendon was Dyson Sharp. Had another good game for them, and I think he's a good find for them. It took a slow start at the start of the year. A lot of people bought into the Dyson Sharp hype, and he didn't live up to expectation, but he's really showing at the back end of the year what he is capable of. But the 3 votes I gave out, I'm giving one to Josh Ward. 33 disposals, 10 contested, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 4 clearances, 389 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. 2 vote goes to Jack Gunston. Congratulations to him for kicking goal number 600 in his career. Also, in the first game of the round, congratulations to Tex Walker for kicking goal 700. But Jack Gunston had 16 disposals, 2 contested, 11 marks, 1 tackle, 403 metres gained, 7 goals, and 11 score involvements. And best on back-to-back weeks where he's had an impressive run off of halfback, and obviously when you're getting all that uncontested work, he's been getting a lot of it, and he's been feeding his forward line like you wouldn't believe, and that's Jarman Impey. 37 disposals, 5 contested, 12 marks, 1 tackle, 836 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 11 score involvements. Essendon will grow with time. We know where they're at. This year, many have touted them as the most unwatchable team, and, you know, things like this happen with rebuilding teams. They'll get back to where they need to be with time. For Hawthorn, these beatdowns have been great, but all of these games that they're comprehensively beating up on these younger, developing clubs that aren't being able to be competitive enough to stay in the game, is this going to hold them in good stead for finals or not? Because when they run up against a Geelong, or they run up against an Adelaide or a Fremantle, or even a Collingwood, a team that puts up some fight, will they crumble when push comes to shove? It's going to remain to be seen, but you can't just discredit Hawthorn. We can say everything we want, but man, when they get that hock ball going, they get it going to some fucking severe circumstances, and it could be scary to watch come finals. We then move on to NG Stadium, GWS taking on Sydney, in a game where I feel GWS's season has been ended prematurely. 51 points the way of Sydney in the end, in a game where GWS just needed to stay in touch. They fumbled 2 weeks ago against Essendon. This was a game they needed to win, and I think just dropping some of these games, it's with a list that they have got, it's so hard to imagine the struggles they've had this year, and obviously injuries hurt them. No Josh Kelly, no Tom Green for the whole year. Tom Green, I think, just shifts the entire makeup of this midfield. Next year, to see Tom Green, Finn Callaghan, and Clayton Oliver running around all together, it's going to be something magical to watch, and I can guarantee you GWS finish top 6 next year if they can stay healthy, because their list warrants it. But no Jesse Hogan, and apparently he's now considering his options to go elsewhere. Going to be an interesting watch on the off-season for these guys, but Sydney getting back to their best in a game where they had won it from the first quarter. This was a game, unfortunately, that falls into the bracket of not who's going to win, but how much are they going to win by. At quarter time, Sydney led 7-4, 46 to 2-1, 13. At half time, they led 12-9, 81 to 4-4, 28. At three-quarter time, they led 17-10, 112 to 8-7, 55. And the final score line saw them win 21-13, 139 to 13-10, 88. Around the ground, GWS got towed up in the stoppage, 10 to 25. And since round 16 this year, they have lost this measure by almost 6 clearances per game, which ranks them dead last in the competition. To think that Richmond and Essendon are getting the shit kicked out of them every week, but GWS are the lowest since round 16, the lowest in the past month for clearance around the ground, is ridiculous with some of the names they've got around that ball. From stoppage, the Swans scored 65 points alone, which is their second best return for the season. and they recorded 46 to 25 clearances, as I just said, which is their equal best differential over the past 10 years, with James Rowbottom in that differential alone scoring 8 off his own boot. I feel Rowbottom is a player that doesn't get spoken about enough. He is one of the best role players in the competition, hands down. If you need someone to lock down and tackle, that bloke goes fucking crazy. Now, as far as the injuries go, I know Finn Callaghan ended with an ankle injury, which could be damning for GWS. If it wasn't hard enough that Toby Green goes down with a quad last week, Finn Callaghan goes down with an ankle this week. Around the traps, 51 points the way of Sydney, but GWS win the disposal count, 373 to 352. They only have 6 less inside 50s, 51 to 57. Obviously going inside 50, though, they only ran at 47%, with Sydney running at 63% efficiency. At the stoppage, this is where the gap is made. 38 hitouts to 25, 46 clearances to 25. Again, at stoppage, 25 to 10, the way of Sydney. Sydney even turned the ball over more than GWS did. GWS registered over 40, almost 50 more marks. They actually had 49 more marks, 111 to 62. This was a game where Sydney only laid 6 more tackles, 46 to 40. GWS had a lot of ascendancy with ball in hand and just couldn't get anything done with it. And whenever Sydney got the ball in hand, they showed the quality that they can dish up. And that is the difference between, a club that is contending and a club that's struggling. You don't need to have 100 plus more disposals to be dominant in a game. They had 20 less disposals than GWS, and they piled on 50 more points from the ball they had. Just quality versus quantity. Sydney are showing they are still amongst the best in the competition. Do not write them off. I still feel Fremantle Sydney could very well be on the cards this year. As far as the votes went for this game, giving an honourable mention to Chad Warner, because a lot of people would have had Chad Warner in conversation here, but I'm giving 1 vote to Brodie Grundy. 23 disposals, 11 contested, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 29 hitouts, 7 clearances, 187 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 13 score involvements, which was, I believe, close enough to a game high. James Rowbottom gets the 2 votes from me. 23 disposals, 12 contested, 1 mark, 11 tackles, 8 clearances, 368 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements. Best on. He did it. He won the medal in the game, and he's getting the best on from me. Errol Goulden, 41 disposals, 11 contested, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 7 clearances, 1,047 metres gained, 7 score involvements. It is great when watching Sydney play, and you have to count down the list here to find Isaac Heaney's name for highest ranked player. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players ranked higher than him on the night, and he still had a great game. 25 disposals, 3 tackles, 6 clearances, a goal assist. But in the past, it would have to have been an Isaac Heaney standing up on his own to get them over the line. But you've got Rowbottom that plays the role, Goulden popping off, Grundy popping off, Warner having a crack. Nick Blakey off of halfback has been sensational this year in all-Australian form. Sydney aren't to be trifled with. But again, when they come up against competing teams, this style that they play can become their undoing. And there were some instances in this game where the forward handball got them into trouble. With GWS, maybe they find more ascendancy with these players coming back in. But boy, when you've got a list as highly touted as GWS's, I still shake my head to think of what could have been this year had they been healthy. Because this year, they've beaten some great teams, they've struggled against worse teams, and I don't know what the fuck is going on. Not often this happens, but a second game for the round that we can quickly skim over, not because I'm a Richmond fan, but because it was very inept. It was the Bulldogs hosting Richmond at Marvel Stadium. It was the Bulldogs by 57 points. At quarter time, Richmond were right in this game, and it was hard fought, and Richmond were playing a style that was taking the sting away from Bulldogs, wasn't allowing free-flowing movement, and I made a post about this on social media because I found it so funny. David King on Fox Footy was highly touting Adamuze in the first quarter, saying that it was brilliant to see Richmond playing this slow-style game, holding the ball up, really stopping the momentum of the Bulldogs, and then 2 quarters later, he's talking about how Richmond holding the ball up is boring football, and they're not doing anything with ball in hand. It's like, make up your fucking mind, knobhead, seriously. But Match timeline speaks volumes. 2-3-15 for Richmond, trailed 2-5-17 at quarter time. And then, yeah, it got ugly. Richmond didn't score in the second quarter. 2-3-15 to 6-10-46. 10-13-73 led 5-5-35 at three-quarter time. And the final score line, 15-15, 105, defeated 7-6-48. Now, this was a game where Marcus Bontempelli didn't really pop off until late in the third term, maybe the fourth quarter. Was well held with disposals early and still just had huge influence on the bearing of the end of the game, which you can kick some junk time goals and you can talk about that, but to see the dominance from the Bulldogs without Marcus Bontempelli truly popping off just speaks to the depth that they have in certain areas. Their midfield is stacked, obviously. They might lack that depth everywhere else, but their midfield were just running rings in the end. They were just happily chipping it around, finding open space. If ever Richmond tried moving the ball laterally, it was getting cut off at the pass. It was hard to watch. I mean, in the second half, Richmond do win the clearance 23-15. So again, clearance game for Richmond this year has been strong. And that's something that I'm proudly taking away because it's something we've struggled with for recent years. But we still get comprehensively tailed up in many situations, especially uncontested work. And it just hurts. It just hurts so much. Don't think there was injuries. We're clear bill with injuries for this game, which is fantastic. Looking at the team statistics, 404 disposals to the Bulldogs ahead of 372. Inside 50s, 61-39, the way of the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs ran at 54% efficiency inside 50. Richmond only ran at 33%, which is 10% down on our seasonal average. It wasn't a good night for us. We weren't getting as many looks. When we did get it inside, it was terrible. We won the hitouts, and we only lost the clearance battle by 2. 40-36 hitouts, 37-35 clearances, in which we won the stoppage clearance by 3, 25-22. So finding some ascendancy around the contest. I mean, uncontested, we only lost it by 19. But, I mean, it was those uncontested possessions where all the easy handballs in the midfield and just running into open 50 and having shots on goal was just our ultimate undoing. Both teams had over 120 marks for the game, which was interesting to see. But of those 120, Richmond only had 5 marks inside 50. Bulldogs took 20 inside 50. Their forward line just put a good press on us. 55 tackles apiece. Isn't that bad of a return, I suppose, but it was a tough watch, and it could have blown out by much bigger margins if it weren't for some players, which, despite the 50-point gap, I'm giving one vote to Nick Vlosten. Easily his best game of the year, and if he wasn't in our defense on that night, this would have blown out to 70, 80 plus points easily. 27 disposals, 10 contested, 11 marks, 3 tackles, 1 clearance, 362 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. 2 vote goes to Marcus Bontempelli. Did end up being one of the better players on the field by the end of the game, even though having that slow start early. 29 disposals, 7 contested, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 3 clearances, 556 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. And best on ground, in my eyes, was Ed Richards. 32 disposals, 12 contested, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 693 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, 11 score involvements. Not much to take away from this for Richmond. I mean, we're competitive in the stoppage, which I think is great against a team like the Bulldogs and the names they have in that midfield core. But just around the ground, we failed. We couldn't take a mark inside 50. We defensively, once we lose the likes of Vlosten and Broad, which Broad's set to retire at the end of this year, if you believe the whispers, it's going to put us in a much damning situation. Ben Miller and Noah Bolter both missing out of that back line hurt as well, and I think them being in there might have aided us a bit, being able to lock down the likes of Norton and try to shut down West a little bit better. But boy, this was a beatdown I didn't enjoy watching. 2 weeks in a row where it's been a hard watch as a Richmond fan, and the Bulldogs, they keep in touch with that wildcard configuration. Can they finish in the top 6 and miss it? I think they might have to, because I think at their best they're competitive, but the gap between their best and their worst is still few and far between. And if they finish in that wildcard round, they could be one of the teams bounced out early if they're not on their not on their game on that given day. So going to be interesting to see how their season finishes up, because they get plenty of looks and plenty of opportunities, but with all the missed shots they had on goal in this particular game, especially some dead rubber gimmies that they should have kicked, could be costly come finals. The first on Sunday saw the tale of two tapes again, first half versus second half. Brisbane taking on Port Adelaide at the Gabba. Port Adelaide obviously regaining Jason Horne-Francis and Mitch Georgiades, but still without Zach Butters, that push and drive within that midfield core. And Brisbane, up until half-time, were absolutely pushed to their limits. At quarter time, they led 3-4-22 to 2-3-15. At halftime, they led 5-8-38 to 4-5-29. Anything could happen from that point in time. But unfortunately, that is where the Brisbane Lions found their edge. Second half was just Lions dominance. 12-9-81 led 7-10-52 at three-quarter time. And the full-time score saw Brisbane 19-12-126 defeat Port Adelaide 9-13-67. This was a game where not only did Brisbane come out and kick 7 goals in the final term just to put their stamp on it, but the uncontested possession count of 40 disposals in that final term just helped solidify it. It was almost like Port Adelaide had fallen away, Brisbane had just ran away with it. And, you know, games like that where those fade-outs happen is a bit unfortunate, given where these two teams are at. I suppose it's to be expected. Port Adelaide do have some youngsters that have come through. They're missing some elite talent. But it was a hard watch in that final term. If you're a Brisbane fan, you would have been lapping it up. From turnover in this game, Brisbane scored 90 points. 90 points. Almost 100 points scored from turnover alone. 8 goals from forward half intercepts and 6 goals from defensive half intercepts. They just put inaccuracy and inability to maintain possession of Port Adelaide to the absolute sword. They have the best goal spread in the league with the Brisbane Lions do, with 9 individual goal kickers per game on average. They had 9 different goal kickers in this game as well, with Morris, Cameron, Bailey and Lohman all kicking 3 goals apiece. And they still had a further 5 players score goals as well. It was, boy, oh boy, Brisbane hitting their straps at the right time. 3-peat could still very well be on the cards here. No injuries, thankfully. There was a very big talking point out of this game where back in, like, behind play, you can see plain as day Ty Gallop grab the back of the scruff of Mitch Georgiades' jumper and slam him head first into the ground. Now, I don't know whether there's been a sanction for that at the point of this recording, but fuck, it didn't look good. That shit looks ugly. If you're going to suspend players for tackles that have players hit their head on the ground, surely deliberately driving the head of a player into the ground with an act off the ball like that has to be considered for a suspension, at least in my opinion. This was, again, very lopsided statistically, apart from when it comes to the stoppage, which seems to be a growing trend over the course of this year. A team can have 100 plus disposals but break even in the stoppage, which I think just speaks volumes to how some teams attribute themselves defensively versus others, which is where the gap is made between the better teams and the lower teams. 413 disposals the way of Brisbane ahead of 322, 63 inside 50s to 45 the way of the Lions, both going at 55 and 53% effectively apiece. Stoppages. Port Adelaide won the hitouts 44-25 but lost the clearance by 2, 37-35, and the only gap was at stoppage where Brisbane won 24-22 in total. It was Brisbane's uncontested possession, and again, from intercept, from turnover, 271 disposals to 181, 90 uncontested more. And they just, again, put them to the sword. 133 marks to 74. Again, just speaks volumes. They get ball in hand from turnover, they'll chip it around, they'll take the sting out of it, they move the ball as freely as they want. As far as tackles go, Brisbane had plenty more disposal and they lay more tackles, 56-43, so the pressure wasn't there. Tackles inside 50, 12-4 the way of Brisbane as well. So unfortunately, as well as a hard-fought half of football, it was for Port Adelaide, that second term was just all Brisbane from start to finish, comprehensively opened up in and around, and there were many players that we could have thrown a blanket over for votes here, but I landed on these 3. Dane Zorko, since coming back into this lineup, has been great in defense. He's not just his leadership, but his drive off of half back is something that I feel Brisbane lacked at the beginning of the season, and the duration that we saw Zorko gone. 32 disposals, 5 contested, 11 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 804 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements. 2 votes I gave to Will Ashcroft. Huge run he's having this year, finding some continuity in his game, which will eventually see him amongst the elite midfielders in the competition. 30 disposals, 8 contested, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 684 metres gained, 2 goals, 2 goal assists, and 12 score involvements. And best on ground, I'm giving it to Zach Bailey. 26 disposals, 9 contested, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 3 clearances, 387 metres gained, 3 goals, 8 score involvements. You could have probably swapped Bailey and Ashcroft around if you wanted to, but that's where I landed. What did we learn? Port Adelaide, they can... Their best and their most solid football can see them remain competitive with the league's best, but unfortunately, the drop-offs happen more often than not. The continuity is truly lacking in their game. For Brisbane, don't write them off. Many did early with the run that they started to have, but boy, they've hit their straps at the right time, and this is why they're showing that their recruitment, their systems that they've got in place, everything going for them, still probably has them ranked, even though Fremantle's clear on top of the ladder. Brisbane still might be the best in the comp, and three-peat isn't far off the cards. Brisbane Fremantle Grand Final, very tantalising, because imagine the ramifications in that. Brisbane going for a three-peat to lock up a modern-day dynasty, Fremantle going for their first ever Premiership Cup. Script writes itself, and Brisbane could be up to their fucking necks in it come September. Final game of the round was at Marvel Stadium with North Melbourne hosting St Kilda. Honestly, on paper, could have been a coin flip. At Marvel, North Melbourne play well, St Kilda have been finding some ascendancy, and with the late out of Rowan Marshall before the game, I thought St Kilda might have struggled, but they still managed to walk away with a 31-point win, with a performance from Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira that was great, but still questionable by some measure, and boy have I blown social media up and I've had some fucking people come at me. Holy shit. Match timeline. Quarter time, St Kilda led 4-3-27 to 1-5-11. Half time, they led 5-8-38 to 4-10-34. At three-quarter time, they led 9-13-67 to 7-12-54, and the final score line saw them win 13-15-93 to 8-14-62. Now, there are some stat lines here. North Melbourne only laid 4 effective tackles in the last quarter, and they had a pressure rating of 144 for the term, so they were very lacking when the ball was there to be won and the game was there to be grabbed. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira's efforts in this game sees him just the 3rd player ever to record 46 disposals and 4 goals in a game. The other 2 were Greg Williams, who recorded 53 disposals and 6 goals in 1989, and Peter Featherby, who recorded 48 disposals and 4 goals in 1981. And also with 1,060 metres gained, it is the 6th highest return ever on record in a weekend where 2 players scored over 1,000 metres gained. Now, injuries. Max King comes back in after over 2 years of not being able to get a game due to injury and does his hamstring, which is fucking so unlucky. I don't know whether his now career is on the line. He'd have to be considering it. 2 years without a senior game, and then he does his hamstring on return. Poor bastard. And Comben ended with a chest injury, which, again, I don't know the severity of. Cooper Sharman was also a late out with an injury of his own. Breaking down team stats and disposals, 404 by St Kilda led 366. They had 58 inside 50s up against 44. Both teams running at 50% efficiency inside 50. Disposals in the stoppage where it counted 24 to 23 the way of hitouts, but St Kilda dominated the clearance 41 to 23 respectively. 19 to 6 in the centre clearance was their biggest gap. Uncontested work was pretty much matched. It was contested possessions where St Kilda had the better, 39 more for the game. North Melbourne registered 127 marks to 102, 33 to 44 tackles the way of St Kilda. Pretty stock standard. It was a game that was arm wrestled for a period. The gap wasn't that big, and then in the last quarter, just failure to have any any defensive presence or pressure cost North Melbourne the game, and they were missing some very critical shots on goal as well. Now, Naz was best on ground in this game, right? He was highest ranked by more than 50 points, 46 disposals, 4 goals, and 10 score involvements. Now, This is my thought process. Feel free to disagree. Some people are calling me a moron. I don't claim to be an expert of the AFL by any means, but I think I'm well versed in the AFL. I put posts out there that if Nick Daicos had had a game that Nasiah had here, people would have been posting that Nick Daicos is a seagull. And you know Nick Daicos loves to get a handball receive every now and again, right? Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, 46 disposals, 9 kick-ins. So you take away 9 from that 46, right? So, okay, he's sitting on 37 disposals. From those 9, he had an outrageous amount of handball receives, especially from kick-in, because he'll get the kick-in and then he runs immediately for the handball receive. He had 1,000 metres gained, but there's still plenty of ball where he kicks sideways and backwards, which I feel is ineffective. When you look at his heat map, only 10 possessions he had for the game of the 46 were inside a 50-metre arc, and it's hard to determine whether that was a forward 50 or a defensive 50 where he had those possessions. 46 and 4 is still wild. 4 goals return is still huge, and I'm not questioning that. But the fact that Nick Daicos with numbers like this would be thrown under the bus and spoken about in a negative vein, but all that has happened from this game for Naz has been spoken about how great of a player he is, I think is a bit one-sided and a bit skewed. If you're going to highlight Naz like this, then we need to glaze Nick Daicos for every game. And some people do that. So maybe it's a little bit of a reprieve and a bit of a shining light that another player gets that mention. But I just feel that Naz would be more effective as an inside midfielder who drives the ball forward. And again, you're probably going to sit there and go, well, he had 1,000+ metres gains. How's he not driving the ball forward? He had 46 disposals. You only need 10 disposals to go 100+ metres, and most of his kicks when he goes long down the line will register a 50 to 100+ metres, eventually. So just to have only 3 tackles for the game, and my dad, he's an avid St Kilda supporter. Can't speak highly enough of them, but he'll happily speak negatively of a St Kilda player if he needs to. And even he said, Naz can have all the touches in the world that he wants and get all the ranking points and SUPERCOACH points or whatever the fuck he might get. He does not have a defensive side to his game. And that's what lacks in his game and stops him from being that elite player. Now, some people are saying he deserves more than $2 million a year based off this one outing. He hasn't been this prominent this year. Some people I've seen in social media talking about, oh, there's not many that have this much disposals and this much goals per game, but yet Nick Daicos clears that. You know what I'm saying? If there's going to be so many negativity and negative comments about Nick Daicos when he overperforms, then surely we can have that same discourse for other players in the competition. But with that being said, I still gave Naz best on ground, and we'll get to that momentarily, because I did give 1 and 2 to some North Melbourne players, which some people might sit there going, well, they won by 31. How'd you not give players elsewhere? Brad Hill, a lot of, again, easy touches defensively. I think Darcy Wilson, probably the one stiffed that I didn't give votes to, but I'm giving 1 to Jai Simpkin. 29 disposals, 10 contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 4 clearances, 438 metres gained, 1 goal assist and 9 score involvements. 2 votes goes to Harry Sheasel, North Melbourne's best. 29 disposals, 10 contested, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 425 metres gained, 1 goal and 6 score involvements. Best on Josiah Wanganeen-Malira. Like, you can't argue the stats, but just the way that the disposal count is inflated, I just feel, 9 kick-ins and then the handball receives, like, it should be more closely aligned to maybe a 25, 26 disposal game if you take away all of those disposals he gets. And some people say, well, if it's that easy to do, then why aren't other players doing it? Because not everyone needs to chase kick-ins and handballs. And for those of you that want to fucking question Nick Daicos doing the same, he used to, but I don't remember the last time Nick Daicos took 9 kick-ins and then got 9 handball receives directly from that. But anyway, I digress. 46 disposals, 8 contested, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 1,060 metres gained, 4 goals, 1 goal assist, 10 score involvements. What did we learn? North Melbourne are getting beat up in games that they should be a hell of a lot more competitive in, and just their lack of pressure in some instances have cost them a wildcard spot this year. Same thing happened 2 weeks ago against Melbourne, same things happened here. Just when the game's there to be won, some players aren't firing. We threw Nick Larkey under the bus last week. Do it again. 9 touches in this game, 1 goal. That's it. Needs to be doing more as a captain, and some people might think that's harsh, but that's the stark reality. St Kilda, keep wildcard chances alive. But can they do this every week? Do they have to require Naz to pop off like he does in order to win games of football? Because if they're becoming heavily reliant on just him and going through him, like Alistair Clarkson suggested in the post-game press conference, they're too reliant on Naz. If Naz breaks down, and they're going to be coming up against some teams in the back half of this year, the next 4 games that are heavily tagging, I think they've got Sydney this week. So Naz is about to run into a roadblock of not only James Jordan, but James Rowbottom. Can guarantee you, if he has 20 disposals in that game, I think he's done incredibly well for himself. But watch him have little to no impact next week because he's got some attention put on him. Just watch. Heard it here first. With each game of the round actively spoken about and dissected, we can now turn attention to the AFL ladder and see where your teams are situated after 20 rounds of football. In first place on 68 points, we have Fremantle. In second place on 56 points, we have Sydney, just ahead of Hawthorn, 2 points ahead. Hawthorn sitting in third place on 54 points, who are only half a game clear of fourth place, who is Brisbane on 52. Trailing them, we have 3 teams vying for top 4, only a win behind. Adelaide in 5th and Melbourne in 6th, locking up our top 6, with the Bulldogs out of that top 6 by percentage, but falling into the wildcard round. Collingwood sit in 8th place on 46 points, half a game clear of next best, which is Geelong in 9th place, and St Kilda sitting in 10th place on 36 points, just ahead of Carlton by percentage, who sits in 11th. GWS have dropped to 12th place on 32 points, similar to North Melbourne, who are sitting in 13th on the same amount on 32. The Gold Coast are on 28 points in 14th. Port Adelaide are in 15th place on 24 points. West Coast are in 16th on 16 points. Essendon in 17th and Richmond in 18th, respectively, both on 8 points. With all the formalities out of the way, we can now turn attention to tallying up those votes and revealing the leaderboard after 20 rounds of football for the Hip and Shoulders 2026 MVP Award. In 10th place on 17 votes, we have Max Gawn. In 9th place on 18 votes, we have Patrick Cripps. In 8th place on 19 votes, we have Will Ashcroft. In 7th place on 20 votes, we have Luke Jackson and Jordan Dawson. In 6th place on 21 votes, we have Nasiah Wanganeen Malira. In 5th place on 22 votes, we have Zach Butters. In 4th place on 26 votes, we have Bailey Smith. In 3rd place on 27 votes, we have Marcus Bontempelli. In 2nd place on 31 votes, we have Harry Sheasel. And in 1st place on 34 votes, we have Nick Dacos. And there is all but one thing left to do before the round can officially be recapped, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 20. And as much as I wanted to squeeze some players in, unfortunately this week it was much harder than most, but this is where I landed for this particular weekend. In defence, I have Dane Zorko and Tom Stewart in the back pockets and Harris Andrews at full back, with Jarman Impey and Nasiah Wanganeen Malira on the half-back flanks and Nick Vlosten at centre half-back. In the midfield, I have Ed Richards and Errol Goulden on the wings, with Patrick Cripps in the centre, with Darcy Cameron as ruck, Nick Dacos as ruck rover, and Caleb Sarong as rover. Up forward, I have Marcus Bontempelli and Zach Bailey on the half-forward flanks, and Jack Gunston at centre half-forward, with Jai Amos and Harrison Petty in the forward pockets, and Shannon Neal at full forward. The interchange has Ed Allen, James Rowbottom, Will Ashcroft, Jaga Smith, and Murphy Reed. Craig McRae is this week's coach of the round, and this week's assistant coach of the round is Chris Scott. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the round has officially been recapped. Do thank you for joining me once more for another video. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to hit that like button down below. It goes a long way to helping myself out and letting YouTube know I'm doing something right around here. And if you want to get on board the community we are building, hit that subscribe button as well. Plenty of videos coming. I've been recording like a madman, so keep your eyes peeled. There'll be a tipping video come out tomorrow, and then preceding that, we've got some fun and games heading into the weekend and weeks following, so stay tuned. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.